It's been a while since Blake Lively's name rocked the headlines, but now the courtroom drama has taken a darker twist. Discovery battles are piling up, and this week, the legal storm reached a boiling point. What unfolded wasn't just paperwork, it was a series of maneuvers that could decide how much truth ever gets revealed. The filings came fast and relentless. A response to the motion for sanctions, an opposition to Jed Wallace's motion to dismiss, a motion to compel against Jed Wallace, and then a supplemental motion stacked right on top. At first glance, it might look like just another round of routine discovery and motions to dismiss, but buried inside these motions were cracks in Blake's strategy. Cracks Wayfair was quick to exploit. Because when Blake tried to force Wayfair into a sweeping omnibus motion to compel, Wayfair struck back. Their argument? Most of what Blake demanded was already set to be delivered, making her motion moot before it even landed. And then, Blake did something even riskier. She filed a supplemental request for documents, stretching all the way up to the present day, almost 9 months after she launched this lawsuit. Wayfair pushed back hard. They weren't about to hand over endless data. They warned the court that if Blake extended her fishing net to the present, then she should also be forced to open her own records up until now. Blake offered no compelling argument against that. The weakness in her stance became glaring. But here's the twist. The judge didn't give Blake what she wanted. Instead, he reined her in. And what he ruled next changed the entire scope of this case. Because when it came to Blake's demand for ongoing discovery, the judge drew a line in the sand. And the consequences of that decision will shake her entire smear campaign argument. The judge's order on Blake's omnibus motion to compel was not the sweeping victory she hoped for. Instead, it was a carefully measured blow that clipped her momentum. He reminded Blake of a hard truth. Wayfair had already agreed to provide much of the information she was demanding. Her request was premature. Yes, she would receive those documents, but with one crucial catch. The real turning point came when the court examined whether Blake Lively could dig into Wayfair's records up until today. Her argument was clear. If her allegations of an ongoing smear campaign were true, then today's evidence mattered. But the judge saw through it. In his ruling, he made it unmistakable. Anything Wayfair is doing now isn't part of some smear campaign. It's simply defending itself in active litigation. Allowing Blake to stretch discovery into the present would be unreasonable, irrelevant, and dangerously overbroad. So the judge drew the boundary. February 18th. That date marked the filing of Blake's amended complaint. Discovery could reach no further. After that moment, anything Wayfair said or did was considered protected advocacy, not a smear. The court spelled it out. Blake's allegations may justify some extended discovery, but they cannot justify perpetual discovery. Each party would provide responses only up until February 18th. After that, any communications with attorneys would fall behind the shield of privilege. And there was more. When Blake tried to pry open other HR complaints against Wayfair, the judge narrowed her reach again. She could only obtain complaints specifically tied to sexual harassment or discrimination involving Wayfair, Jamie Heath, or Justin Baldoni. Any unrelated accusations? Completely off limits. But Blake's attempts didn't stop there. She tried to cast Brian Friedman not as Wayfair's lawyer, but as an agent of the company, a move that could have forced even more disclosures. The judge rejected it outright. If she wanted information from the firm, she had to request client files directly from Wayfair, and those might still be privileged. The message was unmistakable. The days of crying smear campaign are over. The court has spoken, and February 18th stands as the firm cutoff. After that, if anyone, press, creators, or lawyers, speaks on the case, it's not a smear. It's free speech. But just as Blake's discovery net was tightening, another legal showdown exploded, this time involving Perez Hilton. And the fallout from that clash would send shockwaves across YouTube, mainstream media, and beyond. If the discovery ruling against Blake wasn't enough, what came next hit even harder. Because in Nevada, another courtroom twist was brewing, and Perez Hilton was right at the center of it. According to reports from followers in attendance, Perez looked shaken as he left court. Defeated, his hearing deferred. But behind that expression was a legal victory that Blake Lively never saw coming. You see, Blake had argued that Perez Hilton had effectively waived personal jurisdiction, Her claim that by filing a protective order regarding a subpoena, Perez had opened himself up to the court's authority. Just like Jed Wallace had once been forced to respond, if the court agreed, Blake could drag Perez into New York's jurisdiction and force him to hand over documents. But the judge wasn't buying it. He ruled crystal clear. This court has no jurisdiction over Perez Hilton. Perez wasn't just another name in Blake's crosshairs. He was one of several large creators she had targeted, and the list was growing. Just yesterday, Megyn Kelly revealed that she too had become a target. Blake had tried to seize Megyn's confidential contacts and communications from her podcast and platforms, but Megyn struck back with the full weight of her credentials. She made it known she would never reveal sources. She's a member of the press, undisputed, undeniable, unshakable. Megyn Kelly's career spans NBC, Fox News, decades as a journalist, and years as a lawyer. To suggest she wasn't press? Laughable? To force her to hand over protected materials? Impossible. But Megyn didn't just resist. She countered. She explained that she began neutral in this case, reviewing every court document, every filing, every piece of evidence herself. And it was through her own legal expertise and journalistic experience that she reached a damning conclusion. Blake's claims didn't hold up. Her opinion was her own, independent and unshaken. Meanwhile, other names loomed in the shadows. Billy Bush's name had surfaced in filings. Candace Owens still faced ongoing motions. And Andy Senior of Popcorn Planet was battling a motion to quash. But Perez Hilton? He was the immediate test. And Blake had just lost. The judge noted that Perez's filings, whether to seal personal details or to protect himself from endless subpoenas, did not equal consent to jurisdiction. He was acting pro se without legal representation, and his intent was clear. He wanted these issues decided in Nevada, where the subpoena belonged. And with that, the court struck the blow. Lively's motion to compel was denied. Dead in New York. The only path forward lay in Nevada, where press protections run deep. But the war was far from over, because if Blake thought she could shift the battleground to Nevada, she'd be walking straight into a fortress of First Amendment protections that could make Perez Hilton untouchable. New York was closed to her. Perez Hilton had slipped out of Blake's grasp, and the only arena left was Nevada. But if Blake believed Nevada would be easier, she was stepping onto the most dangerous battlefield yet, one stacked against her. In Nevada, Perez isn't just another celebrity blogger. He is positioning himself as a journalist, armed with reporter's privilege. And in Nevada, those protections are some of the strongest in the nation. That means forcing him to hand over sources or communications would be nearly impossible. The judge in New York made it clear Perez belongs in Nevada. The subpoena itself demanded compliance in Las Vegas. And since Perez has already filed a motion to quash there, that's where the showdown must play out. The order in New York? Final. Blake's jurisdictional gamble? Over. But Nevada won't be an easy prize. The state's courts lean heavily in favor of protecting press freedom. Perez may have looked rattled walking out of the hearing, but behind the scenes, this was a victory. His fight continues on his turf, not Blake's. And just as Blake was recalibrating, another storm was gathering. Jed Wallace. Wallace had already beaten back one attempt by Blake with a dismissal on jurisdiction grounds. Now, with his second motion to dismiss pending, the court faces the same question. Does it even have power over him? Blake insists yes, but the evidence is thin, and the judge seems skeptical. If Wallace slips free again, he could be severed from the case entirely, leaving Blake's strategy in ruins. Blake tried to cover her bases. She asked that if jurisdiction fails, then at least the case against Wallace be transferred to Texas. But this request reeked of desperation. Instead of filing properly in Texas from the start, she dragged it out, stretching the fight longer, while Wallace remains largely untouchable. So where does this leave her? Even though Blake scraped together a few small wins in discovery, the reality is clear. The judge is pulling tight boundaries around her case. No more endless fishing, no more open-ended smear campaign claims, and no more pulling creators or critics into the fight without proof. Her leash has been tightened, the judge has spoken, and each failed motion chips away at her credibility. But here's the chilling question. with the court cutting off her smear campaign narrative, with Perez sheltered under Nevada's press laws, and with Jed Wallace likely slipping through her fingers. How much longer can Blake Lively keep this legal crusade alive? The week began with Blake Lively pushing aggressively, filing motions, demanding more, casting a wide net for evidence that could fuel her smear campaign allegations. But by the end of it all, the tide had turned, and the judge had made one thing abundantly clear. This case will not spiral out of control. Her attempt to force Wayfair into handing over endless documents, cutoff at February 18th, her push to label ongoing criticism as a smear campaign, dead in the water. Her demands for unrelated HR complaints, shut down. Her bid to reframe Wayfair's attorney as something more, denied. And when she turned her fire on content creators, Perez Hilton, Megyn Kelly, even whispers around Candace Owens and Billy Bush, her strategy collapsed even faster. Megyn refused to give an inch, standing firmly on her press credentials. Perez Hilton not only escaped Blake's grip in New York, but now faces her on Nevada soil, shielded by some of the strongest reporter protections in the country. Even Jed Wallace looms as another looming defeat. With his second motion to dismiss hanging in the balance, the odds are high that jurisdiction will slip away yet again, leaving Blake with even fewer targets to pursue. So despite minor wins buried in the paperwork, Blake's larger war is faltering. Discovery is no longer her playground. The smear campaign narrative has an expiration date, and the courts are steadily pulling her case back into strict, controlled lines. She set out to dominate this battle. Instead, she's being reined in, step by step, motion by motion. And the question that hangs in the air now is this: if Blake Lively can no longer expand her fight, if the courts continue to shut her down, and if every new motion risks another public loss, how long before this legal crusade unravels completely? Don't miss the next headline. Like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell.